So here we are in Hearts and Minds after Tet. We're ready to start the first red turn, but I just wanted to briefly update. Neither side took a campaign this turn. I looked at it, and campaigns are. The Reds haven't taken one yet, one of the minor ones. They just took Tet. But for either side, you kind of want a fair amount of control of the area already. And the closest either side really comes up here. First core wouldn't be bad, except the blue player already used that one. And everywhere else, well, fourth core they also used. So 2 and 3, there's significant red presence, and they think they can do better by focusing on one of them first. Likewise, red thinks it can do better by focusing on one of them first. So we may see a double campaign next time, which kind of cancels out the campaign if both sides win. Because it's just dove hawk points being switched back and forth. Anyway, let's start with the red player. Okay, so the North Vietnamese moved a force down here and did some actions to reinforce here, as well as converting what Ken Gang, not Eng Gang. I don't know where Eng Gang is. Somewhere here. Under there? Yeah. The U.S. played Commando Hunt. This gives for the entire cost of this, their bomber missions can now attack in Laos along the border. They can use more than one bomber in a province each turn. And Red's going to get less replacement points each turn. Is it replacement? Yeah, not replace. Resource points each turn. They get a free one each turn after 68, 69, something like that. They're not going to get that extra one anymore. All right, on. Well, we finished up that turn. Did a number of attacks actually. A lot of fighting, not a lot of bloodshed. Interesting things happened. Laos cleared by the Allied forces. The communists are going to have to pay to keep their faction alive there. But they played Limited War, which basically is cool because it allows them a 2-point card that they wouldn't normally get. It lets them throw their last card into there, and they used that to gain another. They're at 12 locations now. I believe it's 14 they need for an automatic victory. We'll come back and see what the point up is, what the situation is after the interface activities. I was mistaken there. It would have taken 16 for a victory. However, Dove points are at 19, which is one more than is required for a North Vietnamese victory. So that is the end of this game. Tet was obviously pivotal, and as well as the Allied attempts to increase the war during it. I think it's pretty obvious from anybody who knows the game looking at it that I didn't know what I'm doing in terms of strategy, etc. But I'm hoping that watching the playthrough might give some newer people who haven't seen the game a chance to kind of look at the mechanics, get an idea of what's involved in it. I'll come back with a review based on what I've seen. This is a really, really tiny one, so I think I'll come back with the review right on this one, actually. Alright. Oh, okay. Wow. It doesn't look balanced. I hope that's better. So, just finished up Hearts and Minds, Vietnam. And I ended about the same place where I tend to end in Victory Games Vietnam, but I'll have to say this. I think this one is perfectly winnable by either side. I mean, it's hard to tell. But certainly I don't feel like I'm sitting there saying, oh my God, how could the U.S. possibly win? I feel like I probably made some big mistakes with the U.S., and that's not that unlikely. With the Victory Games one, there's clearly something tremendously flawed. I've seen some people offer the argument that you should put a difference in the points, the cost of the Arvin units. Well, you know, the designer tried to balance things with some thought in mind, and I feel like if you decrease the cost, if you tinker like that, you're liable to be tweaking what he was trying to highlight in the game. Anyway, let's go back to this one. But I believe that this one is more likely to give you historical results, which is shocking because you'd look at, you know, the Victory Games one and say, oh my God, this is the Vietnam game. Well, okay, but it's severely flawed in terms of, you know, the balance being the balance that was historically accurate, and it's attempting to be a historical simulation. This one, I think this one's less attempting to be a historical simulation, but at this more abstract level, it does a better job of it. Although this is a light game, it is, unlike some CDGs, it is very clearly in the wargame genre. One thing that I love about it, and this doesn't make it a wargame or not, is that it's area movement on the map. The map's kind of a flimsy thing, at least in my edition. Maybe other editions are nicer, but it's perfectly serviceable. Some of the areas are a little small. It's hard to see some of the icons, the guns, that are the bases, the mountains, the cities. They're very easy to get covered up. All the same, it's so nice to be able to see an area control game. For me, area control is the top. That is the best way of showing a strategic situation. Games like Third Reich and Vietnam and a lot of other games, I feel well, Vietnam's more of an operational game when it comes down to it, even if it's over the course of the war. But when you get to a strategic level game, hexes I just don't think cut it. They're too detailed, and there's a flaw to the detail as well. We hate to say this as wargamers or whatever, but to me, when you start seeing river lines being misrepresented, mountains, terrains, all this being misrepresented because of this hexagonal grid that you've imposed on your map, well, you're already, I think, taking liberties. Visually, it's less appealing, and you're taking liberties with where the lines really are. Now, in an area game, you're making a different kind of abstraction and saying, okay, this is what's an important area. It could be large, it could be small. There are ways around that. Point-to-point game, clearly, there you can express things probably a little better than even in an area control game, but I find the visual such a negative on that. And in terms of being able to play the game, I mean, I look at the board and I don't understand it because there's these boxes. I think it works well in something like Twilight Struggle. I think it doesn't work so well in Paths of Glory. I think it doesn't work so well in games where terrain and adjacency are more than just sort of a political connection. I have no problem, you know, if everything's very abstracted and you don't have troops crossing the border and having to figure out what the terrain is between them and all that. I think area movement works so much better. Other components, the counters are beautiful. I've already expressed the one problem that I have. Well, I have a couple of problems. There are a couple of counters that seem to be missing, like the tens factor for the Hawk-Dove side. There are tens factor for the stored resource points, which I never got to. Maybe that's my playing poorly. The cards, I really don't like them. They're sharp, they're painful, they're hard to shuffle, but, you know, they'll live. What else? Well, the rules I've already gone into, they're an abomination. It goes, you know, I rag on GMT's rules all the time. These are so much worse. It makes me cringe. On the other hand, it is a fairly simple game, so that once you kind of pay the penalty of flipping through them a few times, you probably won't have to face them too many more times if you play at a decent amount. Speaking of which, I think this is a game that people who like to focus on a single game and really, really play it heavily, and I've seen signs of this over on the Geek, will be very happy with. I think it's one that the investment of effort compared to what you gain out of playing it multiple times is well worth it. Some games you look and you say, you know, it kind of plays out the same every time, or I don't feel like I have a lot of options that are really, really big affecting. Here, you can move all over the place. You can do all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of openness to when do you want to play your campaign cards, how heavily, what your deck is. Your deck, half your deck, well, not half, but maybe a third of your deck is random each game, and you probably won't go through the whole thing. I certainly didn't, but maybe with the whole game you get through most of it. I've already brought this up in another one. The NVA seems a little too strong early in the game in terms of their presence. I think that's an abstraction for the VC. It leaves me a little funny feeling, but I like the fact that it covers the, just to go as disjointed as I can, it covers the areas outside of Vietnam nicely. You can, operations taking place in Laos and Cambodia. We didn't see any cards that allowed either player to go into areas they wouldn't normally be allowed to, except for bombers being able to go into Laos. But I'm assuming that there are such. I didn't. I kind of want to be surprised. Overall, I think it's a pretty good game. In fact, a very good game. Probably the best two-player CDG I've seen. Twilight Struggle is sort of the counterpoint to this. Not that I like Twilight Struggle as much as this, perhaps. Although I do like it. I've grown more favorable to it. But it definitely presents a different picture. And for me, it presents the best of the point-to-point pictures. This presents where most of the point-to-point games probably should be. They should be probably area movement. Just in terms of my pleasure. Some people maybe like bubbles on their map more. Speaking of Clash of Monarchs there. What else do I have to say about this one? Oh, the other component issue, the artillery. Somewhere there's a mention that that's ahistorical, it's too modern or something. For me, I can live with the tanks or cannons being the wrong image or something in terms of that. What I can't live with is when I looked on the board. Well, first of all, when I first looked at the counters, I said, wow, that's a lot of helicopters. The artillery looks like helicopters to me. And you really have to look closely, closer than I usually like to look at counters, in order to tell that is indeed the artillery pieces. What else? Place. I think you could probably get it done in an evening, maybe a long evening. It definitely it's got a nice small footprint on the table. It looks like a good fun game, a nice light war game, but very clearly in the wargaming camp. Some CDGs are not so clearly in the wargaming camp, I would say. A lot of the multiplayer ones are kind of, I don't know. And Washington's War doesn't feel like a war game to me. This very clearly is. However, it's also not much heavier than the one, or if it is any heavier, than the ones that aren't in it. It's not necessarily a matter of weight. It's just a kind of a matter of feel. I would say this definitely counts as a war game. What are we on to? Well, I've got, unfortunately, this need to go on vacation and going to use up my time for work, and I'm going to go home and try to steal my games back. Mainly arrange shipping for them. So I'm going to be out not putting things up for a couple weeks and not recording things. I'll probably do one more light game, but nothing, not even this heavy. I mean, yes, this went quickly. Really, what I do? 2 work days, 3 work days if you count the Sunday, because the Sunday I got very little. So I'm trying to look for something that's small enough and already clipped that I can learn and or play quickly. I don't know what that's going to be. Probably nothing very military.